everyone, to this week's episode of the Marina Perry podcast. I am, of course, your host, Marina Perry. And today I have the phenomenal, the inspiring, the badass Alexis Fernandez, who is a neuroscience whiz. She is also the author of the amazing new book, Be Bold, Manifest Your Dream Life, and the host of her own phenomenal podcast, Do You Effing Mind? So thank you so much, Alexis, for joining me. I cannot wait for this conversation. I know it's going to rock the socks off of our tribe.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be talking to you. I feel like we'll be very much on the same wavelength on a lot of things. So it's cool just to have like an unplanned conversation around all those topics.
Yes, it's going to be juicy. I know it. So first question, always off the cab off the rank, if you will, is what is the animal that best represents your energy, your way of being, your nature, and why?
Oh, that's such a good question. Do you know, believe it or not, I've never actually thought of this, yet I always tell my friends who their animal is. So for me, I would probably be, I feel like maybe a lioness, I think, because I'm social. Because at first I thought tiger, but they're not social. So social, protective, but also a hunter.
Nice. I like it. Yeah. And I know you have many superpowers, but if you could manifest a new one and, have it right now, what would you have and why? What would you pick?
It would be the ability to, if I've lived an experience and I've got the opportunity to share that with someone, it would be for them to learn the lessons in that moment that I've learned through experience. I feel that so often I want to help people and they hear it and they want to take it in, but then they just repeat their old pattern again and again and again. And I just think the best power would be to teach someone a lesson and for them to be able to grasp it fully and learn from there.
That's a good one. Good answer. I suppose the question that pops up for me is, would they learn it if we just gave it to them? Because is a part of learning kind of that precipice of getting over that, like, that aha moment. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I get it. I get what you're saying. And then I'm like, but would they?
No, you're right. You are right. I believe that to truly learn something, in most cases, it has to be experienced. And in a way, I'd never want to take away someone's opportunity to experience or even someone's heartbreak. Like, I would never want to take that away because it's such a rich opportunity for learning and for growth. But I think what's so sad is when you see someone repeat these patterns again and again, and I think the reason people don't learn their own lessons is because they don't take time to just be with themselves. They don't take time to listen to what they want or what they don't want. I think people are always pacifying themselves with distractions. So even when they go through so much pain, they haven't paused to be like, who am I? What do I want? What's going on in my head? They haven't done that. So they haven't learnt the lesson, really.
Well, no, that's right. That's why the pattern's there, isn't it? Like when we're in the space that we're in, which is human behavior, observation, growth work, patterns are all we're looking for, really, aren't they? Like, they're like, well, there it is. There's that big giant pattern on repeat. Are you going to do something about that? And when you're in the pattern, it's kind of like you can't see the wood for the trees sometimes. So you're in the doing. And after you've gone through that cycle again, you're like, shit, did that same thing just happen? And then sometimes in that moment, we have the opportunity to go, oh, why did it happen? The self-awareness piece. But but more often what we do is go, oh, well, it just happened because that's what life is, or that's what's going on. Like they kind of often maybe don't recognize their own power in that moment and their own attention in the pattern, which is what we're going to dive into. So you are a neuroscience genius. So firstly, I would love to know, there's so many things. I want to drop in and firstly, just on a personal level, as a soul sister, just extend you the biggest heartfelt congratulations on this.
Thank you.
I mean, I also like just classic you. It's like no book, boom, book, boom. I'm just like, fuck you, Alexis. You know what I mean? And at the same time, there's that part of me that's like that because, everyone who knows me knows I'm running this literal sabotage pattern around my own books. And then at the other time, I'm like, yes, go girl. I'm so stoked for you. Like every part of me is exploding with sheer joy and like, you know, like, oh, just bliss in my soul. And that's the bigger part. Yeah, that's the bigger part.
But I feel like for you, like you are a big manifester and you do make a lot happen in your life. And I feel that for me, a lot of things have happened where when I focus on one thing so much, it just doesn't come to fruition. And I know why, because I have to have it. And the moment you have to have something, it doesn't happen because half of your focus goes on what happens if I don't get it. And the moment you think what happens if I don't get it, goodbye. And with the book, I always had in the back of my mind, oh, it'd be so cool to write a book. But then truly, about 2 years ago, I thought, I'm going to write a book. That's what I'm going to do. I'm writing a book. But I said to myself, when uni is done, and this is pre-COVID, when uni is done, I'm going to France and I'm just going to go to Paris and I'm spending 2 months and I'm going to write a book. But because I still had another year and a half left of uni, there was no resistance. I was like, that's later. I don't have time for it now. That's later. And because there was zero resistance and it was there, it came to me well before I was ready and I was approached to write a book. And it's so funny when you just put something out there with no resistance, bang, it comes when you're not ready and you've got to be ready to just take it.
You're 100% correct. And I actually want to unpack that just a little more because it's actually massive for the listeners. What I heard you say and what I think is valuable for the listener to tune into is the lack of attachment to so the way I teach this is that one of the reasons we sabotage most is because if we attach meaning to our worth, our outcome, some result in life, in the having of it, when you said I have to have it, like
yes.
if we attach some level of value, like I'll be more this or more that, and if you have codes in your unconscious mind around what that could mean, that could be either amazing and or not safe, you will avoid the attainment of that which you have attached too much meaning to because it rocks too much of your identity and your current reality. And this is why we have this experience of like almost like beginner's luck, or like someone just picks up a bat and they whack it amazingly and everyone's like, how did you do that? And they did it because there was no, as you just perfectly said, zero resistance. And that's almost the best place and best time to go and create true magic and see what you're capable of doing, because you haven't loaded meaning, you haven't loaded barriers and blocks and all this bullshit that we as humans do create to limit our genius. And that's kind of what I want to unpack with you. So firstly, congrats on the book. And secondly, it makes perfect sense why it just happened as easily as it did, because you didn't have all this like meaning loaded around it. You just allowed the flow to come, which is brilliant and speaks to us. I think that the power of that like imperfect action and just leaning in as opportunity.
Like and it's so powerful. It's so powerful. And the more you do it, the more things just happen. And you realize that that's the way it is. That is just the way it is. And if it didn't happen the first time, you probably haven't done something wrong. You've just got to go with that current and just keep rolling, keep taking action on other things. And when you feel that, I think that when you're holding on to something too tight, let it go for a bit. It's fine. Like nothing, like timing isn't everything. I think you've just got to let something go and just return when you're less, I think like you're saying, attached to the outcome or attaching too much of your identity to the outcome, because then like need reeks of desperation. And that's with people and that's with energy. Like when someone needs something, you just don't want to be around that energy.
I was just thinking that as you said it, it's kind of like that neediness in a person, the person who kind of very subtly begging for the compliment or subtly like clawing at your time. Energetic, that need is repelling. And we know through manifestation, right, or even energetics on a quantum level, if you're constantly saying, I want it, the subconscious language there is, I don't have it, which is the affirming magnetism. Like it's not
exactly. And I feel with that, I think that a lot of people put other people and things on a pedestal. When the moment you put something on a pedestal, it becomes this whole weird power dynamic and you're no longer on that person's level. So, and the set, like if someone's sucking up to you on paper, you're like, what more could you want? Someone doing everything for you, compliment. But when someone sucks up to you, you're like, oh, go away. Like you want to be at that level with everyone around you. And so if you're always putting opportunities and people on a pedestal, you're never going to be there at that level. You have to, in your mind, get there before you physically do and be at that level. They're no better than you. They're no more superhuman than you. It's just an opportunity. It's just another person. And I think that's how you've got to look at it, as you would a relationship.
Yes, I think the thing that I'm noticing in performance for me, and I spoke about this recently on social media, was this dynamic of pressure. Like if we can remove the pressure and the expectation, it just creates so much more flow and freedom to just simply have it, experience it, be with it. So I suppose the book is called Be Bold, Manifest Your Dream Life. So what does bold mean to you? Why do we want to be bold to manifest our dream life?
I think bold in the sense of truly being comfortable in your own skin, which I think everybody knows what that looks like. Everybody has someone in their life that they can instantly say that person is themselves no matter who they're around. That person is themselves and comfortable in their own skin no matter what. That person probably is never jealous because they probably just appreciate other people, but they're so grounded in who they are. I think bold is that it doesn't mean being the most confident or being the loudest or being the smartest. It means being so there with who you are and that being unshakable, because there's actually few things that it takes to be who you are. It's none of the peripheral things. It's none of the relationships or achievements that you've made. It's very simple. But I think a lot of people complicate it and think that it needs to be, I have to have this for people to like me or to respect me or to want to hang out with me. So then they put a fake foot forward when they meet somebody. They so badly want to be liked or want to get that opportunity. So instead of just being them and thinking, let's just let this roll and see if someone responds positively to me, they think, what does this person want me to say? What does this person want to hear? And then they kind of get all tangled up. And then I think that's where confidence problems come in, self-love problems come in, because they're not confident with putting just them rawly forward. I think they get tangled up.
I mean, if I'm honest, I would say that like a huge percentage of people that I interview on this podcast, this comes up, the fragmentation of our identity, the being an inauthentic or a masked version of ourselves in the seeking of approval of others. And then, in some way or another, a thought leader like you will say, be your authentic self, step into your true you, come back inwards, go within instead of without, all of the things. But what I love about your and my personality is we are big action takers in life. Do you know what I mean? Like we're not just esoterical thinkers, although we're that too. We love the big thoughts, we love the deep dives, we love the juicy conversations, but we also want to know how to make it real. Do you know what I mean?
And
like
actionable.
Do the doing that aligns with that concept. So my question is, if being bold means being your true authentic self in like unapologetically, and I loved what you said, in an unshakable way, because from that foundation everything else stems, what are your tips to help someone who's like, I know that I'm not doing that? Like Alexis, I know I'm not doing that. And I hear you, and every part of my soul wants to do that. I don't even know where to start. I feel like I'm so far off course. Like, help me out. Throw me a line, sister. What should I do? Like, what would be your answer to that?
So I think that first, number one, two things to start with. Number one, you've got to be able to crack open your life and kind of look at it and in different sections of your life. You've got to look at your relationships, your career, your this, your that. And first, you've got to pull apart what you are doing versus who you truly are, because you could be living a certain life, but it's not a true representation of who you are. So figure out firstly what you actually want, what you don't want. It doesn't have to be an identical reflection of what is actually happening in your life right now. And then secondly, you've got to be prepared to start really, really small with a lot of things. And I would say that the best way to start with being truly yourself, and it's so basic, is stop agreeing with people when you don't agree with them. Stop being, that would be the number one thing. People don't realize how much respect they earn for themselves the moment they stand up for themselves once. If you're the one that stands up for yourself, or you're the one that's, and I'm not talking about an argument, but if you don't agree and you have nothing, no good comeback, just say, that's cool, I disagree, or I don't agree. Like, I think people are so worried to have a conflicting viewpoint or a conflicting, and I think that's what gets in the way of a lot of Oh my God, I lost you there. Can you say, is that all good?
Okay.
I think that's what gets in the way of confidence and good relationships. And, you know, I think that if you're always agreeing with people, you never truly show who you are. Or if you're not voicing your opinion, or if you're not just saying, no, this is me. And a big one is when people agree with a put down, when someone's put you down and you're like, yeah, I know. And you brush it off and you quickly just, because you think that if you accept the joke about you, or if you accept, you know, this like backhanded compliment, then it turns it around and it makes it lighthearted and fun. But I would disagree with that. I would say that one of the best ways to start being bold is these tiny, tiny moments within your day where you can start showing up for yourself and being like, I am the only person in my life that needs to have my back. Everything could fall apart. And if I have my back, I know I'm up again tomorrow. I'm up again next week. I'm up again next year. And relationships, ideally the good ones stay, but they come and go in your life. And you have to only focus, number one, on the relationship you have with yourself. You've got to be the one to back yourself. You have to be the one to stand up for yourself, because no one else is going to do it.
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so much in that. What you say, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. And again, I'm going to just pull it apart for those listening. I agree. You know, since my girls were little, I've always said to them, the only person that I have to go to sleep with every night for the rest of my life, every night for sure, is myself. So if I am at peace with myself, if I can go to sleep and tell myself I love myself, I'm solid, you know. And it is a truism that I think we struggle with in society, and we need to really address this forever afters and fairy tale concepts that we float around. But it is a truism that relationships do come and go, and that may not feel comfortable, and people may want to be in denial about that. But if if almost all of your relationships are staying all the time, guess what? You're probably not growing. And you're
Exactly.
probably, as Alexis has pointed out, disowning parts of yourself to stay inside of a container that gets you the acceptance of the other person inside that relationship. So if we can be adult enough to recognize that people will come and people will go, and that's okay. And the thing that you said that really hit me in that last little riff that you just gave is you have to have your own back. And that is actually where your power lies, starts, begins, and ends. Because if you don't have your own back and you're constantly looking for someone else, you are then at the mercy of their own shitstorm of self-esteem, and you know their ebb and flow as to whether they're going to affirm you or not that day. But it doesn't mean you have to swallow your own bullshit, or you know, tell yourself lies about your, you know, your flaws or what you're working on. But it's like, can you see all of that and still be a stand for your worth, for yourself? And I love what you said, and it's a really good take home. So I'm going to offer this as a challenge to the listeners, is for 1 week, even every day, do what Alexis just said. And if someone says something that you actually disagree with, do not let the people pleaser have the microphone and go, oh yeah, you're right. Oh, you're. Instead, just go, even if you like Alexis said, simply say, that's an interesting perspective. I don't think I'm 100% on board with that. You don't have to say, I disagree, and kind of in an awkward, you know, or like, you're wrong. Like it's not a fight, but it is simply letting them know that you're going to stand separate from them in perspective. And in standing separate,
that's sometimes where you learn the most about another person. You might actually learn more about the person saying, can I offer my opinion on that?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that could be the greatest gift that you give them in that moment, is a reflection that isn't just this perfect shiny yes. And I'll go deeper than that and say that I think right now more than ever, on a collective level, what we're talking about on the micro is what we need on the macro. Because on the macro, we do not have these conversations where we are comfortable saying, yeah, I really disagree with that. That's not resonating in me as common sense, even though I'm being told that if I had common sense, or if I wasn't stupid, I'd agree. Something in me is really speaking a different, I'm not even sure what it is. Like, can you even come into a conversation and simply your ownership is, I don't agree, but I'm not yet sure what I think about that. Like, that's the degree to which, if we can be comfortable with ourselves, imagine a world where we don't all have to agree, but we can respect each other, hold space for each other. Like, I pray for that day all the time.
I know.
I pray for that reality. And right 100%. Now I get concerned because we do have a very strong narrative in our collective, and we have a lot of people that are afraid to speak counter to that, because we have a greater number of people who are conditioned to people please and not rock the boat. And so we're abandoning our own intuition, and we're abandoning our own wisdom simply to conform to the majority. That's a separate issue. We'll sidebar it. But
yeah,
what I
totally agree though. Totally agree.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is the muscle, the minute muscle, the postural, like the posture muscle that builds the capacity for that kind of global movement in our bodies and in the collective as a whole. So I'm going to throw down that challenge. When someone says something, even if it's like what they want for dinner, like it doesn't even have to be major. Yeah, I don't feel like that tonight.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Well, what do you feel like? I don't know, but it's definitely not Mexican. Like whatever it is, like drop in, find your truth, and simply stand for it on a tiny little level every day. Super huge. I love that because it's tangible. It is actually the beginning of the thing.
Yeah, and it's the beginning of, I think that you can't have self-love if you don't have self-respect, and I think that's the beginning of respecting yourself and seeing it play out instantly in the moment. You can go to bed that night being like, wow, I really respected myself today, and I can measure it because I can see how it affected me instantly and I felt good.
Yeah, and I would piggyback on that and even say that self-respect stems from self-trust, which is the standing for each other that you mentioned, like having your back, and the self-trust leads to safety. Because if we can feel safe with ourselves, then that leads to what you really said, which is it's safe to be ourselves, because we can be a container for ourselves. So it's huge. Now, what do we do when we maybe practice this and we're like, okay, I'm going to stand for myself, and it maybe feels like the world is not accepting of who we are being? Do you know what I mean? Like across the board, maybe people are like, they don't want to be around us anymore because our opinions differ. Or maybe we start to be more of ourselves, or we speak more of our mind, and we start to realize, oh gosh, I don't even know if I like the people I'm in hanging around, or I don't even know if I like the job I'm doing, or like all this other stuff comes up, because I think sometimes that's why people don't want to rock the boat, because they're afraid they can't swim, in the water, or they can't handle that storm. So can you speak into that concern that people might have? But what if I do all that and suddenly I do feel respect for myself, but then what could change, and what would I do if that changes?
If that changes, they're just not your people. You've got to be less. If people aren't responding to you loving yourself, that's on them. And you just have to peacefully tap out and make room for new relationships. Because the thing is, you're going to start to attract those new relationships pretty quickly. If you start really tapping into that aspect of yourself, being like, this is what I want, still always being respectful, obviously, but this is what I want, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I believe in, then other people will kind of, even if they don't agree with you, but they'll resonate with that kind of energy, that honest energy, and they'll want to hang around you. And the people that don't like that energy, or think you've changed and can't accept that change, that's ultimately their problem. And you shouldn't waste your time arming and ahhing about, but what are they going to think? Because people are always going to think something of you, and it changes all the time. So you can't waste your time thinking, like, even the people that love you probably bitch about you behind your back. It's not a bad thing. You've just got to think, I'm not going to concern myself with what is spoken about me. It's not my business, and that's fine. If they then say our relationship isn't the same because you're changing, and if they can't accept that, then it's not your problem, and you have to just let it go. I wouldn't resist that.
And the other thing that I have found to be true, and I don't know if you'd agree, but is even the story that we run, like even the idea that if we be who we want to be and people don't like it, well, that's their problem. It's almost actually like their gift as well, because if now I'm being my authentic self and it doesn't serve that person, well, then me being inauthentic didn't serve them either. Do you know what I'm saying? Like now we've both got an opportunity to drop into true alignment. And if I pretend to like them and pretend to support them or whatever it is, but it's not really authentic, they're getting a lesser version of me anyway, and they deserve better. They actually deserve someone who's fully all about it in a genuine sense, rather than you trying to play safe and just not rock the boat.
Totally.
So when you study neuroscience and you go deep into what makes us do what we do, and the brain and the body. And I'm curious about the brain and the body, particularly as it pertains, because I know that you are an unbelievably healthy human with so much energy, and you're a physical trainer. And I come from that background too. So for the people listening, if they're like, okay, Alexis, you seem like you're so high vibe. You understand the brain, you understand the body. It's easy for you to be motivated. You're just probably always motivated. You're probably like a robot. But what about the days when I'm not motivated and I don't want to eat well and I don't want to move my body? Or maybe I struggle to ever want to move my body or eat well. What can you tell us from the perspective of neuroscience that you've learned that we can do, I don't know, to flick that switch or change that energy or spiraling in the opposite direction? Like, what's the go-tos for getting on board between brain and body?
Yeah, so I think that number one, never rely on like motivation, or like never look at it as like, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be never. Firstly, you have to prepare. You have to always prepare, because I have had so many days in my life where I've woken up so unmotivated. The difference is, for me, is that you have to raise your standard for yourself. You now have to create, instead of thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I could do this every day? Wouldn't it be nice if I had the motivation to do this? And change it to, it is a non-negotiable that this is now me. And in order to be this version of me, this has to be done. There is no other way around it. So now that you're aware of that, you then start thinking, okay, what daily actions do I have to put into practice to make it happen? So for example, last semester it was my final semester of the master's, and it was so exhausting and draining. So many mornings I was waking up thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through the next few weeks. This is just like doing my head in. Will I have time to pack everything in plus everything else? And so there was not a bit of motivation in there, but what was there was structured days. I would time block, I would do this, I would do that. Everything was kind of, it wasn't an option. And the beauty of that is, when it's not an option, you don't sit there crying, being like, how am I going to tackle that? You tackle 1 hour at a time. This idea of looking at this massive, bigger picture, do it once or twice. But really, you've got to be focusing on, what am I going to get done in this hour? You'll be amazed. People underestimate what they can get done in a week, but they think that they've got to get so much done and all this shit done in one go. And it's not the case. I think you've got to start chipping away, break it down into blocks. Instead of, this is the problem. If you say, in 1 week, I want to achieve this, you wake up Monday morning and you're like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. What am I going to do? I'll have a coffee. I'll sit here. Oh, I'll scroll through my phone. I don't want to. And before you know it, it's Friday afternoon. You've done nothing. What you need to do is, you got to say, okay, this is what I want to achieve. Let's break it down into a few sections. Now let's dedicate 4 hours on Monday to it. 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off. 45 on, 15. You'll be amazed at how much you get done when you block your time and when you do something. It's not exciting. It's nothing special about it. But before you know it, you're a brand new version of yourself. In 6 months' time, you won't recognize yourself and how productive you are and the connections you've made and what you've learned in that time. And it's because you've been doing the most basic, mundane things day in, day out. And it's, I think that for me, obviously, if you eat well and if you train, that's going to, accelerate the process a lot more, because that's when you can focus better and that's when you can sleep better. But ultimately, anybody can do that.
Yes. Okay, cool. So what I'm hearing is you're saying occasionally look at the big picture, the vision, where you want to go.
Yeah.
And like the metaphor I might use is, look at the building you want to scale or the mountain you want to scale, but then get clear on that, put the bloody ladder against it, and then don't look at the mountain anymore. Just look at the next rung. Would that be the right kind of metaphor
Exactly.
analogy?
Exactly.
And then to get really strategic, it sounds like you're very pro time blocking, and that you're very pro the what is that called, the science of like the productivity ratios, like not going for big stretches. So do you work as a 45 on, 15 off? Is that like you're pretty?
Yeah, that to me is like my sweet spot. Some people it's a little bit less, some people they can do more, but for me 45 on, 15 off is perfect, because your brain can't do like intense focus for a long period of time. You can't sustain that level of focus for a long period of time. So it reaches a point where it's just going to be really inefficient, or just it's not effective. The same like exercising. If you're doing the same exercise reps again and again, it's going to get to a point where it's really bad form, dodgy reps. It's just pointless. You're wasting your time. The same thing goes for when you're trying to focus on something. If you get foggy, and that's when people start reaching for the phone, reaching this. The way I look at it is multitasking doesn't exist. You're switching your focus back and forth. And every time you switch your focus back on a task that requires creativity, it takes you a few minutes to actually get back in the zone, you know? So if you're doing something that requires creativity or intense thought, like study, then you need to put that phone on silent and you need to have it away from you for those 45 minutes. You cannot be switching your focus. And then those 15 minutes, do what you want, watch Netflix, text everyone, go on it. Like, it doesn't matter. It is a free time to let your brain just completely relax. And I think once people come to terms with the fact that you can't actually multitask on conscious activity, then they'll realize why it is that it takes that you could do something in 2 hours versus 5 hours when you're trying to multitask.
Yeah. And this is kind of the thing, isn't it, with people who are highly successful? I mean, everybody's got the same amount, well, all got 24 hours in a day. And so, you know, as they say, success leaves crumbs or leaves clues. And it is very often that I hear highly successful or people who are doing big things in the world, you know, very often it does come down to these, and you said before mundane, and I suppose it depends how you want to view it, but you know, it's not always sexy to talk about time blocking. And we kind of want this magic pill. It's a little bit like exercise and nutrition. We're always looking for this magic pill.
Yeah.
But the magic pill is the structure allows for the flow. You know what I mean? And the structure creates, you know, it's like there is a philosophy, and I forget the name of it, or it's a theory or something, that something will take up however much space we give for it. Do you know? I forget what that.
Yeah.
Some theory. Anyway, and it's like, so if you say it's going to take 3 hours, it'll take 3 hours. It's kind of like magic. This is the magic pill. And if you say it's going to take 20 minutes, or if you only have 20 minutes, you know, when you have those things, and this is very true for me because I can work very fast. My brain can, like, my synapses are very quick. And so I actually sometimes don't do well in learning experiences that provide too much time, because it's like I did the thing and now my brain's like, oh, what now? And then I get all sorts of distracted.
Yeah.
But I find that when someone's like, I'll give you 2 minutes and you have to come up with the thing. But if they give me 2 hours, I will take the 2 hours, but I'm all distressed and thinking about all the things and working it out. But if they said it's 2 minutes, lock it in, my brain will go straight to the answer.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
like, whatever time we allow for the task, we're going to fill that time anyway. And so what I'm hearing you saying, if you can maybe give more details, in maybe the same way that in fitness, people might meal prep on a Sunday, you know, for the week.
Yeah.
Are you kind of saying plan your week out and, you know, put some time blocks in? And this is, guys, for anyone. I mean, if life's flowing great for you and you're happy with it, awesome. But if you're not seeing the results you want, what Alexis is really breaking down here is how to go from where you are to where you want to be. And what I heard her say, which I hope you did, is, you know, the actions you're doing now are going to deliver the results you're doing now. If you want different, you have to do different. And potentially, initially, you need to create some structures and some frames for you to crawl up until that becomes innate and ingrained and your natural way of being. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Totally. And I think a lot of people say, but I don't have the time. I don't have the time. For anyone who thinks that way, or just for anyone in general, I would sum up how many hours are in a week. I normally know this number. I can't think of it right now. And then subtract all the time that you spend sleeping, all the time you spend commuting to work, all the time at work, all the time at gym, all the time doing cleaning around the house and cooking and eating, and subtract all of that. What you have left there is quite a bit of time to do something. You can socialize, you can, you know, just spend time relaxing, you can read, you can work on your side hustle, you can do something, whatever you want, you can learn something new. If you're looking at that and you've got all those hours left over, but you're thinking, wait a minute, but I don't have a spare moment in my day, that's because you are wasting your time, probably in between tasks. A lot of people waste a lot of time in pockets in between things that they're doing in their day, and it's spent often on their phones most of the time. And it's literally kiss that time goodbye. You're never getting it back. So it's actually quite a shocking experiment to do that, and look at how many hours are spent doing the stuff you absolutely have to do and what's remaining, because there's so much time remaining for a lot of people, and you're going to realize like, whoa, I could have started my own business 3 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do. And you know, the really most precious commodity that we have is time. And so often we're not utilizing it. I think that a lot about our society, you know, because I'm very big on experiences. And at the moment, one of the things I struggle with most is, you know, the limits on our freedom to go and do things, you know, like whether it's just, you know, go rock climbing or whatever it is, you know.
Totally.
And I equally, I'm someone who's very good at, you know, I never struggled for, oh, what should I fill my time with? Like I'm always good at creating new things and I've always got things I'm working on. But I do look at our culture at the moment and wonder if, you know, when it gets to the end of our days, and I'm pretty sure you would have read the book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, you know, will we all go, holy shit, why did I spend so much time on that bloody device looking at someone else's life instead of really dialing up the magic in all of the moments that were available to me? Like I really feel like that's going to become an epidemic, you know, greater than any epidemic that we're dealing with is the regret of just witnessing other people's lives instead of living our own. So what, from the science of the brain, neuroscience, and from, you know, your own personal experiences, what do you see are the 3 biggest mistakes that people are making around the lives they want to be living versus the lives they're living? Like, how are we getting in our own way? What do we not recognize about how we work or our brains that we could be tapping into? Like, what would be either your tips around what we should be doing, the 3 must-dos, or the 3 mistakes we're making? Like, just point it out to us.
I think the biggest one, number one, is lack of action. And I think people say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I don't do this until, no, you're an avoider. That's what you are. There's no such thing as a perfectionist. You're just an avoider, because how can you be a perfectionist if you yourself haven't taken action and don't know what perfect is? You know, like you're just an avoider and you're not doing it. You know, people have to, and action can be the smallest thing. It doesn't matter. But this idea of people always talking about what they're going to do and never taking action, and the action could be the smallest thing ever. I think a lot of people are like, wow, look how much you've done in a year and a half. All it was for me was just taking consistent action. Nothing I did was just out of this world with resources that no one else has. I have the same resources as everyone else, at least in my circles and at least in this country. And it literally was just daily or weekly action. That's all it was. And often it didn't take, other than studying, of course, it wasn't like the podcast wasn't taking me crazy hours. The book, yes, it was a bit intense, but it wasn't consuming my life. It's, you know, I believe it's taking action and knowing your purpose. And your purpose doesn't have to change the world. Your purpose can be selfish. I think people think that, oh, unless I'm doing something that's going to fix mankind, I feel like it can't really be my purpose. Yes, it can. I think one of the best purposes is do something with so much joy that people around you are happy just being around you. That's a great purpose, you know. So find that and link it to your daily action. I think lack of action is your biggest regret ever.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the reason we don't take action is because we're afraid of, going back to that first point, what people might think if we fail or what people might think if we succeed. You know, it's always like that societal concern based on the outcome, as opposed to, as you clearly point out, taking the action gives you the feedback to keep taking the action, to take the process, to get the progress that you're actually seeking in the first instance.
Yes.
But
and I think that, yeah, I feel like with taking action, I think a lot of people, of course, they're scared to fail and they're scared of what people would think of them. And they're scared that if they take that leap of faith, then they've just left behind something that they'll never get back. And the way I look at it, it's kind of 2 things. Firstly, you're never going to be, once you take that leap of faith, once you decide to do that big thing, you're never going to be the same person anyway. I can guarantee you're not going to look back and think, oh, I wish I was my old self, because you would have learned something, you would have evolved, you would have changed, you would have grown in that time, that even if it all fell apart, you're just a different person. You don't want to go back to your old life anyway. Most of the time you don't. And so number one, so that's like a comforting factor, I think. And then another thing is, don't ever I think people tell themselves it's going to work out, it's going to be perfect, it's going to this, it's going to that. And because they don't believe in it, they don't want to then take that leap and do it, because they're like, I'm telling myself all this stuff, but I don't believe in it. I think you should not attach yourself to any outcome, whether it fails or whether it succeeds. All you need to do is say, I am resourceful. That's it. Because if it doesn't work out, you're resourceful. You can do something about it. That's all you need to build on, how resourceful you are. I think everybody should always be learning a new skill, meeting new people, always reaching out. That's your resources. That is where your safety blanket, if you want to call it, is. It's your ability to bounce back and to respond to a situation if it doesn't go as planned. It's like your ability to improvise in life. And that's based on how resourceful you think you are. So if you work on that, you don't need to worry about if it's going to work out or if it's not. That kind of unfolds naturally.
Yes. And I mean, obviously, a lot of what you're sharing here, one, is proven in the science, but also knowing you as well, as as someone who's just an author, I feel like these are a lot of the skills that you've either grown up through, or have, and then as a result they've gotten stronger as you've fortified the experience, which has reaffirmed the belief. So what would you say? Well, first of all, is that true? Do you feel like these underpinning presuppositions around the way that you look at things and the psychology of giving it a red hot go and being in action and I am resourceful, do you feel like they are things that you grew to know through your family and your conditioning, or did you have like a later awareness in life? Like, was there an aha? And then if it's something you always knew, what would you say to someone who's maybe grown up with less self-assuredness or self-awareness or self-resilience? How can someone go about getting that if it's not innately there?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing is, so I did grow up with it, but then there were some moments where in my life where I had everything boom, and then it just falls apart. And then again, I've got everything, and then it just falls apart. And what I started to notice is, instead of responding in a way of being like, oh my God, it's all going bad, I would realize, wow, I actually bounced back quicker than I thought, or I actually was able to, so it's not all bad, it's fine. It all comes down to something that's sort of, it either happens in your parenting or it happens with like a big event that might occur. It could be trauma, it might not be trauma, but something big that happens later in your life. But we all have something called an internal working model, and it's our belief of what we are capable of, who we are, what the world generally is, and how people are generally going to treat us. And that's a belief that we have in us. And if you have an internal working model that's, the world is an evil place, people always treat me like shit, I am not a winner, I lose, I fail at everything, and I don't like myself. If that's your internal working model, then you genuinely, because the brain likes like thoughts, you're going to seek out things that prove your internal working model. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Even if you have no idea about it, that's the worst thing. You're not doing it on purpose. People don't do it. But if you have it in the right way, the world's generally a good place, people are generally good people, I'm resourceful and I like myself, then you're always going to be looking for something to prove that, yep, that was a bad person, but that's an outlier. These people are good. So the number one thing is to acknowledge. That's the first one, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So you might have been brought up in a world, and you'll be standing here being like, but that is my belief system, that is my internal working model where everything's bad. The first thing you need to do is really start to break it apart and think, okay, wait a minute. Am I modeling this belief system of someone else? Have I gone through a childhood where everything did go wrong, and that's obviously why I'm now feeling this way? Or, and start to realize that this was created in you, and your brain is constantly seeking similar things, because it's easier. If you think a bad thought, it's so much easier to think of another 10 bad thoughts than go from a bad thought to a great thought, so it's always trying to find similar things. So if you can put the brakes on it, shed some light on it, so you're not doing this subconscious thought process, shed some light on it and start to really break down, okay, wait a minute, like, where has this come from? And even if I can't identify where it's come from, is it true? And then start, every time you have that negative thought, instead of trying to override it with the best thought, if it doesn't feel right for you, just say, is this true? Prove it. But I can't, because the world is not an evil place. There's all this information showing me that there are good people out there. I'm just choosing not to look at it, So I think you've got to, the number one thing is to kind of just crack it open. And I think when you shed light on darkness, darkness can't thrive, obviously, you know?
Yes, I agree. And I mean, this is the work that I teach, because as you so beautifully pointed out, the brain is seeking sameness through its reticular activating. It's going to seek to prove itself right about that which it already knows, because it's an efficient machine and it doesn't want to have to rework the wheel if it doesn't have to. And if you're going to continue to accept the experiences you've had, it doesn't really mind if you're happy or not happy. It just cares that you're alive and that you're going to continue to survive the same cycle. So it's just going to keep pulling it in so you can get more and more masterful at surviving the exact same shit. But if you'd like to experience different stuff, then it does require, as you beautifully pointed, you said acknowledgement, which I would say is awareness first. Same though, right? Like you got to see what it is. And then when you said you've got to say, is this true? And can I prove it? The thing is there is a part of your brain that will feel like it can prove it because we're that clever, right? Yes, because she said this and she meant that. So watch for that part, because when that happens, the questions need to get a little cleverer, I would say, which is like, okay, well, is this true for everyone on the planet or just for me? Because that's where you get to shit test whether you're just holding the cloud over yourself. Oh yeah, well, it's not true for them, or them, but it's true for me. Well, hold up. Then it's not a truism that I can 100% say is ultimate truth. It's like a truth. It's a truth of my reality. And so the beauty of what you're sharing here, which I would love the listener to really, really, really receive, is that you are the creator of your reality. And if what's showing up doesn't feel good or isn't serving you or isn't aligned with what you want, then, as you've said multiple times, crack it the hell open and just look. And what you will find will fascinate you. I assure you, it won't terrify you. It will fascinate you. It will always make sense in some wacky tobacco way, right? Like it's like, really? What? Oh, well, on a really basic level, that actually makes perfect sense. And then you got the capacity to do something with it. So let's say someone does that, either with a coach, or they do the work, or they read a book and they unpack it all. And then what has been for you, either the actions or the behaviors or the profound learnings that just really helped you create the shift? So we're talking about I looked at it this way, either the perspective shift that led to the behavior shift that then led to the reality shift. What are some key things in there that just might have been things that you're like, you know what, Marina, I really love that, or I found that useful, or when I do this helps? What would you suggest there?
I think for me, one of the best things that worked is always trying to put myself in a problem-solving mode as often as possible. And it doesn't have to be something really, ideally nothing that you're attaching too much emotion to it, because that's where you start getting anxiety, and that's where because I think like anxiety really comes down to like who you are right now and who you think you should be. Ultimately, I think that anxiety is that gap. But if you can get into a problem-solving mode daily, your actual mindset shifts, even if it's irrelevant. So for example, let's say you want to start, okay, today I'm going to start doing this harder puzzle, or today I'm going to do these quizzes every day just to kind of sharpen up my mind. What it does is it for the time that you're problem solving whatever you're working on, and it could be part of your life, it could be something completely just for fun. But what happens is, number one, it's a meditation. You're not thinking about anything else. You're really in that zone. You are so focused. You are so present. Then what happens is you actually switch how your brain is operating. You literally are starting to create new connections. You are forming new connections. You're creating physical change within the brain, and your brain goes from being used to reactive to being proactive. Now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. So you actually start to change how your brain perceives a challenge. Okay. And it could be so basic as like doing, who wants to be a millionaire quiz. It doesn't matter, but it's putting yourself in a situation where you've got a challenge that you have to overcome, and make it harder and harder and harder. And the more you get into this problem solving mode, the more you realize, wait a minute, I can solve a problem, or I can be a bit resourceful, and and before you know it, you're tackling bigger and bigger and bigger things, but with the same mindset as when you were tackling smaller things, where it's not a big deal. It will happen eventually, So I think that for someone that's starting off like, I don't know what I'm doing now, just start something, and that's going to be your problem solving thing. Just start at the smallest level,
I actually love that. And what I heard you say, which I think is, I don't know that I've heard anyone really say it like that, but it's almost like looking at the areas of your life that might need big shifts, but then taking it to something that you're even doing solo initially. When you said, do the puzzles, it's like you don't have to go against all the societal impacts of what that might mean, but you're still flexing the muscle. And I often say to people, if you want to get really strong in your mindset, like train. Like I'm really big on training, because when you don't want to do the last rep of a set, or when it hurts, there is something that there is a neural pathway that has to be linked in and activated for you to finish a workout. Like there's a resilience that happens there when that I can't do it, that voice, and then the other one goes, yes, you can. And then you do, and you're like, oh, I can do the hard thing. And what I'm hearing about this lateral thinking, that you're suggesting is like, yeah, do a Sudoku, do puzzles, do, creative drawing. And then I would say lay it into that, like make sure you're noticing that you're doing it so that you can identify as that. So that then it's not only that your brain can do it, but that your brain can do it, which then gives you the confidence to layer it in context. So you've got that capacity to apply across the board. I love that. So if you're listening, like maybe just thinking to yourself, okay, what is the skill that I think that I lack? Or what is the skill that would help me there? And then where can I take that in a safe environment and practice that skill or that habit in a really safe, small way, just so that I can start to identify with being capable of that capacity or that, skill set. That's awesome. I love that. I want to circle back around though to something that you said, because I thought it was really cool. And I'd love you to unpack it more. When you talked about anxiety is the gap between what we are doing and what we think we should be doing. I don't know if I'm rephrasing what you said.
So with who you believe, who you are and who you believe you should be. It's that gap there. And it's this discomfort with that gap. And the bigger the gap is, the more discomfort you're going to feel. And it could be something so simple as, a lot of people say, I don't know why I'm anxious. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. It's because there's something that's switched something on, something that's woken something up or reminded you. And it could be subconscious because you're focusing on something else, but it could be something that has, I don't like using the word trigger all the time, but it has triggered it. And it's now a lot of people like, but I don't know why I'm anxious. There is a reason why you're anxious, but you're just not addressing it right now, or you haven't paused to think about it. So the anxiety starts to grow and grow and grow because you're like, something's wrong in me. I don't know what's right. So you're thinking right now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. You dropped out for quite a bit there.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Can you hear me now?
Good. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to tell you what I heard, and I'll get the potties to cut this back.
Okay.
You were saying it's the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And you said the bigger the gap, the more intense it is. And then you started to say it's when you swoosh back around, or something about swooshing, and it was something like this, and it just froze, and we didn't hear the rest of it.
Okay, what was it? So, I'll just...
Okay, just go back to anxiety is, when it's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. So the thing is.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So anxiety is the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. But a lot of people will say, yes, but I often feel anxious and I don't know why. Like I have this anxiety, it's bubbling inside me. I feel unsettled. The thing is, I can guarantee you, if a lot of people just stopped and paused and listened to themselves, they would know the reason why they're feeling anxious. Often it's just this underlying current, but because you're not pausing and just stopping and asking yourself what's wrong and like what is going on, your body doesn't have the opportunity to be like, this is what's going on, this is what I'm stressed about, this is what I'm avoiding. So you just carry on and that feeling gets bigger and bigger. But regardless, whether you know what it is or whether you don't, that feeling of unease is ultimately, it's working on the same pathways as fear in the brain, the exact same pathways. And ultimately it's saying something's wrong. And it's a feeling of, I shouldn't be me where I am right now. I should be this, or I should be there, or I should be feeling this, but I'm not. And it's that gap, it's that void. And that's what causes people so much discomfort, basically.
And so I'm not sure, but what I'm hearing, and you can let me know if this is true, when you say it's that fear, it's triggering the same neural pathways as fear, is it essentially your system saying, I don't feel safe? And when you're saying, like, stop and listen to what's going on, in that listening, kind of like the same with a toddler throwing a tantrum, when we listen, sometimes just listening and they go, I want this and I want this. And if you're like, shush, shush, not now, don't yell, it's like it keeps going. But if you pause and you say, what is it that you want? Okay, I hear you. We can't have that right now, but I hear what you want. Suddenly they feel seen, they feel heard, and in that they feel safe. So is when it's going through that fear pathway, is it because it doesn't feel safe with ourselves in that experience?
Yes. Yeah. And you don't feel safe and you feel this unease. You feel like it is, and you feel fearful. You feel fearful and you can't pinpoint what it is. So that's why people don't call it fear, because they can't pinpoint what the stimulus is. So they call it anxiety. And it runs in the same way. And it is that idea that I think, exactly like you said, if you give yourself the opportunity to be heard by you and to be seen, then number one, at least it stops growing, at the very least. So it stays the size it is, that bubble of anxiety, at the very least. And in most cases, it's going to start to shrink because you're looking at it. And you also start to pinpoint exactly what caused this wave of anxiety. Was it that you got a text from a person and that name reminded you of something else, and then bang, that? Because as you start to identify it, instead of your whole day being this horrible day of anxiety, you can be like, no, it was those 5 minutes spent when I saw that and it reminded me of that. And the reason it didn't feel good was because, just break it down, kind of look at it coldly with no emotion and no judgment. Be like, this is what happened, this. Okay, cool. Let's just continue on my day. But I've taken the time to pause, and I found that if you can isolate the event that causes you the anxiety, it does not take over your day than if you suppress that emotion. If you suppress it, it's the worst thing you can do.
Yes, agreed. So again, what I'm hearing, and for listeners, when you feel whatever it is that someone would classify as anxiety in the body somatically, so whether it's the heart rate, whether it's a sick feeling in the belly, or whether it's the crazy thoughts going, and you just feel whatever you would classify as anxiety, you're saying step one is pause or something and listen, like really like listen to what's happening, the story that's alive, and try to assess the trigger. Now, would you suggest doing that in the moment, or is it okay to do it in reflection? What would, is it kind of, what else do they need to do to kind of have it over time, either dissipate or start to completely resolve?
Yeah. So ideally, if possible, in the moment, just so it doesn't grow and get out of hand and get to the point where people can't function socially. A lot of people it just gets too overwhelming and they have to kind of retreat. So if you can in the moment, but if not, it's really good to do that exercise at the end of every day, especially for people that suffer anxiety a lot. But the interesting thing is, and this is a really like weird fact, but the symptoms, the physical symptoms of anxiety are the same as excitement. Okay. So and the same as like physical exertion. So what I have done in the past and recommended people do, and this is what, a lot of psychiatrists as well within the Brain and Mind Center would talk about with cognitive behavior therapy and things like that, is that you get the person who's suffering from like a bout of anxiety to just do like 10 squat jumps, or be like, wow, I'm actually really excited about something. And you kind of intercept that thought pathway and you kind of change it to being like, am I anxious or am I excited? And then you kind of like trick your mind into kind of just stopping and being like, whoa. And then you almost can switch in the moment to be quite excited actually about something. It's really weird because it's the same symptoms, or if you've got all this nervous energy, you get them to do like burpees, squat jumps, burpees, just release. And by the end of it, the physical symptoms that they're experiencing is the same as anxiety. So they kind of, it gets blended in and they're no longer, because what exacerbates anxiety is focusing on your symptoms. If you're sitting there thinking, my heart's racing, my face is getting hotter, blah, 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 your anxiety is getting so much worse. So if you then make something else bring on those symptoms, then you're less likely to be focusing and growing it into something bigger than what it is. You're able to kind of be like, oh, that's because I just did 10 squat jumps,
or it could be for some other reason that isn't so like weighted in our psyche as something negative. That's super interesting. I mean, I do know that excitement and fear are the same somatic response. It's just often we forget to breathe deeply with like fear often has that shallower breath, and so we always say just to breathe into it. But that's a really interesting protocol, like almost to hijack it.
Yeah, just like hype the person up, and then the good thing about it is everyone knows how to calm themselves down from a workout. Everyone knows. You relax, you take some deep breaths, you lift your head up, you have some water. Like you it's big movements when you're trying to calm down from a workout. But few people in the moment think about the basic steps to do to, like you said, like take some nice deep breaths, change your posture, change your physical state, and you are going to start to feel better. But when people are super anxious, it's easy to just try one of the things and then revert back and try, so it is practice, but
yeah. And I wonder too if like just simply doing the exercise is helping literally just shift the emotion, right? Because emotion is energy in motion, so it's helping to have it flow, plus it's activating endorphins and dopamine, like whether it's even on a chemical level, just switching it slightly. I don't know.
Really well, cool. Definitely. I mean, exercise is one of the best remedies for the brain. Sleep and exercise are the best things you can do for your brain. So if you're able to ideally do those intense bouts of exercise, it's going to do you a world of good in the moment and then long term as well.
So what's the science with regards to sleep for the brain? Because look, I've got exercise down pat. So this is a selfish question. And, I'm one of these people that in my youth, I value sleep and I'm much better with sleep now, but I'm definitely keen always to enhance it because I definitely have that tendency to be the person who's more inclined to be like, oh, well, especially when I was younger, I was like, oh, sleep when I'm dead. And I burn the candle at both ends. You know what I mean? I'm well beyond that now. And I sleep great. I'm not someone who wakes. I don't have restless sleep, but I do sometimes struggle to get to sleep because I'm so high energy. And I've definitely started to notice as I'm older that with less sleep, I actually still can function better than most people. Like I know some people when they don't get good sleep, they just don't function. My partner's like that. He's like, if he doesn't get enough sleep, he's just not a human being. And he's like, you don't want to go near him. But the question I have from a science level is, I know that it's a spectrum as to how much sleep we each need. But what does the science show about sleep? Like, is it about, like, I mean, I've heard so many conflicting things over the years, right? Like it's a number of hours before 12, or it's total time, or it's the routine of waking up at this. Like, have you got any hacks or tips around sleep health or sleep hygiene that really science has absolutely proven is good for the brain and good for our functioning?
So one of the main things that's kind of a big talking point at the moment within neuroscience is that you want to be asleep by midnight for sure. You want to be asleep by that point most of the time, if not always. And it's got to do with the circadian rhythm. And a lot of people say, but what about shift workers? And unfortunately, shift workers just will have more degeneration long term unless they're doing other things to kind of support their brain health. At the end of the day, the way the circadian rhythms work, all the science around it is you want to be asleep by midnight and you want to find your ideal sleep time. So that does vary for a lot of people. Older people, it's kind of all over the place. Some older people need way less than they normally used to. Some need way more. Teenagers, it's around 10 hours. So it's quite a bit. A lot of people are like, oh, teenagers are lazy, but they're not. They just need around 10 hours a day. It's crazy. And then most adults need between 6.5 and 8.5. That's kind of normal. But again, you've got to find your ideal sleep time and stick to it. If you're oversleeping and then undersleeping, it's hard to then fall asleep at around the same time every night. And that's where then you kind of mess up that cycle a little bit. So number one, I would find your ideal sleep time. And the way I would do it is try and try 8 hours. And then if you still feel a little bit like sluggish when you wake up, try 7.5. If it's worse, try 8.5. Do it. It might take you a month or so to figure out your ideal sleep time. But once you have it, try and kind of honor that time and stick to it, because you're going to feel a lot more energized in the morning. You feel a lot better because you have rhythms that you go through in your sleep, and you naturally should normally, once you get it into a pattern, you should normally naturally wake up once you've told your body, okay, this is the time, and eventually your body will learn. You'll be waking up at the same time every morning. As far as sleep hygiene, there is a lot of things you can do before you fall asleep. One of the main ones is try and have like dim light before you go to bed. So if you're going to brush your teeth before you go to bed, do it a good hour beforehand, because you're putting mint in your mouth. You've got these bright lights, it's very stimulating. So then we can't just fall straight back asleep after we've been like quite stimulated in the bathroom. If you're going to read, ideally just an old school book, just paper, not a backlit screen. This is especially for people who struggle to fall asleep. Obviously, if you just can bang fall asleep like that, you don't have to do these things, but all these things help wind down. The best thing you can do, if possible, is to have a routine, because your brain, like we were saying, again, the brain likes the brain. If your brain notices, okay, I'm doing the exact same thing the last 30 minutes before going to bed, then it's going to start to learn, oh, okay, she's picked up the book, she's switched on this thing, it'll make you fall asleep way faster. Once it gets into a habit, a routine, it knows what's coming up and it just does it for you,
Yeah, a little bit like Pavlov's dog. You're kind of conditioning yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly.
Love that. So sleep, like I'm saying, I've come to realize through my own research that sleep is more important than I used to think it was in my youth. So when you talk about for the health of your brain and longevity, and this will be the last piece, but I think it's important because I feel like Alzheimer's and dementia is on the increase. I don't know if that's just because, my parents are a certain age where it's just in my reality, it seems like it's more prevalent, or if it really is more prevalent. And I'm curious, like for those of us who are young and can be making better choices now, what does the science show around kind of keeping the brain as a really optimized, vehicle? Like aside from, I know you said sleep and exercise are the top two. So I heard that. Is there anything else? Like, is there any science that shows a particular type of diet? Is there anything around, I don't know, any other weird nuances that we'd be like, or any vitamins or supplements where it's like, the science is pretty clear on this?
Yeah. So when it comes to so definitely and this sounds really cliche, but a balanced diet in the sense of, think about, like, you need sugars for the brain. The brain cannot function without glucose. You need fats. The brain cannot function without fats. You need, like all these things, you need protein. The brain is made up of protein, So, and a lot of these things that is occurring in the brain has to be topped up with your diet. Most of the things that are going on in your brain are not naturally just produced out of thin air. It has to come from the diet. And so if people that for no reason, like, fair enough if you're allergic, but for no good reason cut out an entire macronutrient for no major reason, I don't think that's a good idea, because your brain does rely on the macronutrients. It is a macronutrient for a reason, so I think unless your body is screaming otherwise, you need to be giving it everything. And I also think, of course, water is a big one, but oils are really great. And this has been proven for a long time, like the omega-3s and all of that. We always want to be. I actually have not had much water today. And I'm like, But yeah, omega-3 oils, certain vitamins, vitamin D, vitamins. Look, vitamins and minerals in general, if they are naturally occurring in vegetables, in fruits, it's because we need to be having them. And then something that's also really good is to also keep up, if you're not having enough protein, at least keep up like your branched chain amino acids and things like that, because that also helps, your brain health. Also, medium chain MCT oil and things like that, medium chain triglycerides and things like that, really good for the brain. And circling back to what you're saying about sleep, the dementia and Alzheimer's, yes, the prevalence is going up, and a lot of it is going up because people are living longer, so they're having more opportunity to even get it and for it to present long enough that you're going to see that degeneration. But also when you sleep, your brain does something that it doesn't do when you're awake. and it's the vesicles open up wider and you get like a flush through of cerebral spinal fluid through your brain, and it comes in and it clears out all the debris, and that's not happening when you're awake. And a lot of the time, it's really interesting, 95% of people who end up getting Parkinson's disease or Parkinson's disease dementia have had some sort of a sleep deficit, a sleep problem, like a major sleep disorder. Not just like, oh, I can't fall asleep, but a sleep disorder, like REM sleep disorder or something like that. It's very, very highly correlated. And they don't know if one causes the other. They're not sure yet, but there's this crazy link between poor sleep and degeneration. And when we have dementia and Alzheimer's, you know, there's all these like plaques in the brain, there's tangles in the brain, and that which cause lesions. And if you're not getting that clearance of all the rubbish at night, then those things aggregate, they accumulate, and that's where they cause the damage in the brain. So it is super important. And like young people are like, oh, when I'm older, I'll worry about it. But it is, I think, relevant, because even your memory is based on how well you sleep. So, you know, even if you're young, if you're studying, get good sleep. You're better off sleeping well than pulling an all-nighter studying, because you'll retain nothing from that all-nighter, and the sleep will at least consolidate the memories that you have formed, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a big deal. And I feel like when I did research a while back, the flushing that you just spoke about, I forget the name of it, but that's one of the reasons, and it's mammalians, I think, that it happens in, right? And that's why all mammals, even wild animals, will sleep with their heads slightly higher. Is that one of the reasons that they often recommend we either naturally sleep with a pillow or to elevate the top of your bed, because it helps once that goes up to flush, it then naturally drains down? I
actually don't know that. So possibly that could be.
I feel like I've read that in some research at some point, and this is why some people actually prop their bed up at a slight, and even with babies we do it, or whatever else, but it's like a slight increase. Maybe I should do something. That's just me remembering something. Hasn't been confirmed by Alexis.
That's definitely interesting. It could be, definitely.
All right, Beauty, we're going to wrap up, but I've got a few quick fire questions for you. So the first is, what is your number one go-to to elevate energy?
A run for sure. Definitely a run.
So movement or running. Yeah, love it. Okay. And then what is the number one book, other than your own, which of course we're going to link to? What is the number one book that you just were like, that book changed my life, read it?
The Power of Now. Definitely.
Good book. Okay. And then what is your number one go-to for elevating empowerment, the experience of empowerment?
My go-to to feel empowered myself would be to read messages from my listeners, the ones like that where they've said that I've helped them or whatever. Like if I'm, and that reading that helps me plan my future podcast. It gets me in like this crazy zone where I feel so grateful and so on purpose doing that. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And then what would be your go-to for someone who's like, I want to feel more elevated or expansive around expression, like expressing out to the world my truth? I know we kind of touched on it. So if you feel like we covered it with saying what's real for you, then that's cool. But what do you do when you want to like dial up your expression?
Vision boarding for sure. So I always am updating like a vision board. And for me, and I keep it super updated. And I think a lot of our expression, while it's superficial and while ultimately it doesn't mean anything, but I think it's really fun and quite a nice thing to do for yourself, to even change up your style, change up how you outwardly express yourself, your makeup, how you do your hair. Is it crazy? That brings you a lot of joy in the moment, which then I think helps you express who you truly are. So sometimes you need some leveraging platforms to help you. And I think that your style can be a big one. So I've got all these like vision boards of like style for fashion, style for this, style for that. And then ultimately people that I aspire to be like, or to have careers similar to, when I look at that, when I go back and look at that, it gets me into that mindset. And because every time I look at it, I'm in that mindset. Now, every time I revert back, it happens faster and faster. You can just glance at it and be like, okay, yeah, I'm in the zone. So definitely vision board.
Yeah, that's so cool. All right. And if every part of this podcast got deleted and everything you've ever done got deleted, but this next one sentence or 10 seconds is all that the world had of your knowings, your truth, you're like, team, guess what? This is actually, when it all boils down to it, really, you're just all about this. Like, what's your one message to the world?
So my message would be that ultimately your power lies in how you respond to situations, because it's ultimately everything is within you. So no matter what is going on around you, no matter who breaks your heart, no matter who enters or leaves your life, no matter who employs you or fires you, everything that occurs, every joy in your life will be based around how you choose to perceive it and how you respond.
And hence the importance of mindset work and self-development and inner work and growth work. I love it. So true. Couldn't agree more. Beauty, thank you for the magic that you bring to the world and your high vibe energy. I know that you've gone on to create a career of incredible impact, but I knew you before those times, and you were always the same vibrational frequency of just elevated embodied aliveness. And that's ultimately, as I see it, your greatest gift. And all really, when people tap into your teachings, it really tapping in on a deeper level just to that frequency. So I appreciate you for being on this planet at this time, doing the work that you do. I see you, I am you, I love you. Thanks so much for being on the show, gorgeous. Sending you so much love.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to talk to you. That was awesome. I love that.